Hello OpenMaze experimenters, my name is Kyle Alsbury-Neely, and in this tutorial I'm going to walk you through how to build multiple 3D environments for your OpenMaze experiment using some of the built-in tools that come with the Unity editor. And we're also going to learn how to download environment objects from the Unity Assets Store. Now, if you haven't already set up OpenMaze on your computer, you're going to want to check out our Step 1 tutorial video, which covers how to download, install, and set up OpenMaze on your computer. For this and other tutorials, I recommend having the Unity Hub and OpenMaze project folder somewhere accessible. As you can see, I have mine here on the desktop. And we're going to start off by opening our Unity Hub and selecting our OpenMaze project. If this is one of your first times opening OpenMaze in Unity, you may want to adjust your windows so that you have a similar setup to what you see here. And this is just going to make following along with the tutorial a lot easier. And you can do that by grabbing the window tabs and moving them around your screen, as you can see I'm doing here. Once you have everything set up, we're ready to start building our environments. OpenMaze environments are built using Unity scenes. And these environment scenes can be found in the Scenes folder. To open up the Scenes folder, go to the Project window in the bottom left of the screen and double-click the Scene folder. When you open any of these folders, you'll see that the contents are displayed in the window to the right. What you'll notice is that OpenMaze comes with several Unity scenes. Each of these scenes provides different OpenMaze functionality, which we'll go through in more detail in other tutorial videos. In this tutorial video, I'm going to show you how to build an environment using the 3D environment scene. So let's just go ahead and open up this scene by double-clicking it. And what you'll see is that when you open a scene, it activates the scene in the rest of the Unity editor. The Scene View window at the top is used to create the environment. For right now, we're just going to get used to navigating this window. First, make sure that you have the Hand tool selected from the top left tool panel. When you have the Hand tool selected, you can use your mouse in a variety of ways to navigate the scene. You can use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out. If you hold the right mouse button, you can pan the scene. And holding the left mouse button will allow you to grab the scene and move it around. So as you can see, our environment is currently pretty empty. This is because OpenMaze only provides an environment template. It's left up to you, the experimenter, to create whatever environment you need. You should note, though, that it's not completely empty. If we look at the hierarchy window, you'll see all the objects that are contained in the open scene. And you'll notice that there are in fact several items already contained in our scene. These objects allow the scene to be used with all the OpenMaze features. And for the purpose of this tutorial, it's not important to know exactly what all these objects do. But it is important to know that you don't want to delete any of them while building your environment. In this tutorial, we're going to want to build two 3D environments. And in order to do this, we need to make another OpenMaze compatible scene. To do this, you're simply going to double-click the 3D environment scene and then navigate to the Edit tab at the top of the screen and select Duplicate. Now you'll see that we have another 3D environment scene in our Scene folder. I'm going to go ahead and rename these scenes 3D Environment 1 and 3D Environment 2, but you can rename them whatever you'd like. It's important to note that in order to use your environment with OpenMaze, it must contain all the objects that are in the 3D environment template. The easiest way to ensure this is just by duplicating the environment like we just did, but you can also just copy and paste all of these items found in the hierarchy window into your new environment. It's also important that you add your newly created scene to the experiment build. In order to do this, you're going to double-click on 3D Environment 2, the one that we just made. Then you're going to go up to File, Build Settings, and then add open scenes. And you'll see that when you add the open scene, that environment 2 now appears in the window above. And then you can go ahead and close build settings. Okay, now that we've added our new environment to the build, we can start building our environments. Let's start with building 3D environment 1. Go ahead and double click the 3D environment 1 scene to open it in the Unity editor. For this environment, I'm going to show you how to use the built-in terrain building tool that comes with Unity, which allows you to build custom land terrains for your environment. To add a terrain object, navigate to the Game Object tab at the top of the screen, then to 3D Objects, and then to Terrain. You'll see that when you do this, a plane will be added to your environment, and you can see this in the scene window. To move the terrain, go back up to where you selected the hand tool, and right beside it, select the Move tool. When you do this, you'll see that the object has 3 different arrows, which allow you to move the plane to move the terrain on the X, Y, and Z axis. You're going to want to ensure that the plane sits flat to the ground, and you can do this by adjusting the Y axis. You can either pull it up or down in the scene view window, or you can go over to the inspector window and change the Y axis to 0. Now you'll notice that OpenMaze scenes have a little white square in the middle, and this just indicates the center of the environment, placed at 0, 0. And what we're going to do is just move our terrain plane over top of that. Now in order to start building our terrain, we're going to go back to the inspector window, and we're going to start using some of the terrain building tools. First, let's add some texture to our terrain. You're going to do that by selecting the Paint Terrain tool and then ensuring that Paint Texture is selected from the drop-down menu below. Then you can go to Edit Terrain Layers and select Add Layer. When you do this, a window will appear showing you all the terrain textures. Let's add a few. First, we'll add this cliff texture. You're going to double click on that. Then we'll go back to Edit Terrain Layers and add another layer. Let's add a grass layer. And we'll also add a third layer, the sand layer. Now, once we've added our terrain textures, we can then paint the terrain in different ways. What you'll notice is that when you hover your mouse over the terrain, you'll see a circle show up. And this shows you what area of the terrain will be painted when you click the mouse button. If we go ahead and click the mouse button now, it's not going to paint anything because we haven't selected a texture. Go back to the inspector window and choose the sand texture. Now when we click on the terrain, we'll be able to paint the terrain with the sand texture. Let's go back to the terrain layers and select the cliff texture. And we're going to take that and we'll just paint another section of our map with this cliff texture. Alright, great. Now we have 3 different sections to our terrain plane. We have this cliff texture, we have some grass in the middle, and then we have this sandy beach texture over here. Next, we'll give the terrain some 3D features. We're going to go back to the inspector window, and instead of selecting the paint texture from the drop-down menu, we're going to select raise or lower terrain. Now let's make our sandy section a little beach-like or dune-like, and we're going to do that by selecting a different type of paintbrush. I'm going to select this one. And what you'll notice is that when we go back over the terrain, we'll actually see what will happen to the terrain when we click on it with our left mouse button. It's going to raise the terrain in this little dune-like way. And I'm just going to hover my mouse over top and then click the left button to pull up the terrain to make it look a little bit dune-like. Now if you raise your terrain a little bit too high and you don't like it, you can hold the shift button and then click the mouse button, and this will lower the terrain back down. You should also note that you can increase the brush size if you'd like. And when you do that, you'll see that more of the terrain will get lifted when you click. You can also increase the opacity, which just increases the intensity that the terrain is pulled up when you click. Okay, awesome. Now let's add some mountains to our terrain. So I'm going to click a different style of paintbrush, and I'm just going to go over to our mountain area, and I'm going to start pulling some mountains up here. Okay, great. So now we have a little bit of a mountain area over here, a beach area over here, and a grassy knoll area in the middle. The next thing we're going to do is add some trees to our terrain. And you can do that by clicking on the tree tool just next to the paint terrain tool. And in order to add trees, we need to edit some trees, or we need to go to edit trees and add some trees. When this window appears, you want to go to this little circle here, and then it'll give you all of the options for the trees that you can add to the scene. So let's add some, first we'll add some broadleaf trees. Then we'll add some coniferous trees, maybe for our mountain. And then finally, let's add some palm trees for our desert area. Now, once the trees have been added, you can paint multiple trees at the same time by selecting a tree and then again hovering over the area of the map that you want to place a tree. Again, you can increase or decrease the brush size. And when we do that, we can add more trees at one time. So I'm just going to add some palm trees. I'm going to take the tree density down. And then when we click, you'll see that if we zoom in, a bunch of palm trees have been added to our area. And just like before, if some trees aren't in the area that you like, if you hold down the Shift key and press, it will delete those trees. Okay, so now we have some palm trees in our little sandy area. Let's add some coniferous trees to our mountains. And then let's add a little forest of broadleaf trees down here in our grass. Okay, great. So we've created our first environment very easily, just using the built-in tools that already come with Unity. You should note that I've only gone through some of the terrain building features in this tutorial, but if you want to learn more about the terrain building tools, there are a ton of really great tutorials you can find online with a quick YouTube or Google search. Let's move on to building our 3D environment too. We'll do this by first opening it in the Unity editor by double-clicking 3D Environment 2. Make sure that you save your first environment. And for this environment, I'm going to show you how you can use the Unity Asset Store to download some objects for your environment. To do that, you're going to navigate to the Asset Store tab, which you can find at the top of the scene window. Let's try building a city environment. Go to the search and type in city. Now for this tutorial, we'll restrict our search to only free assets. And you can do that by going down to the pricing and sliding it so that we only look at free objects. And let's just choose one of the first ones, perhaps this white city. First, you'll need to download the asset pack by hitting download. And then you'll need to import it into your Unity project by hitting the import button. We'll import all the assets. Now you'll notice that in the project window, under the assets folder, we have White City. We can click on that to see all of the assets that come with this package. Let's check these out. Prefabs are usually the prefabs of the individual objects that come with the package. So in this package, we see that there's buildings. If we click on that, we can see that the package comes with a variety of different buildings. This package also has a variety of different things that you can use for roof objects. Now, in order to use these objects in our scene, we're going to go back up and select the scene view window. And then we'll zoom into the center of our environment marked by the white square. Before we start using these objects in our environment, however, we'll just add a simple terrain. We'll go back up to the game object, 3D object, and terrain. And again, we'll center our terrain over the white square by going up to the Move tool and just positioning it roughly over the center of the environment. Let's add some texture to our terrain, again by going to the Paint Texture tool, then selecting Paint Texture, and adding some terrain layers like we did before. Let's just add the grass once again. And we'll just paint our entire terrain with this grass texture. And now that we have a simple terrain, we can start adding objects to our environment. And we can do that just by going back to the project window and selecting the objects we want. So let's add some buildings first. Usually what I like to do is when I click and drag a building into a scene or an object into the scene, I just like to center it at the center of the scene so I know exactly where it is. As you can see, you can then move that object to where we want it in the scene by going back up to the Move tool and moving it around. Now you should note that there's other tools that you can use to manipulate objects in your scene. So beside the Move tool, you'll see that there's the Rotate tool. And when we click on that, it allows you to rotate the object in different ways. There's also the Scale tool. And when we click on that, we can scale the object in different planes, or we can grab the center and expand it in all directions. And let's just go ahead and do that for a couple more objects. And obviously, if we had more time, we could make this city look however we want it to look by using these objects. Another thing to note is that a lot of these packages already come with pre-built scenes. So if we go to our White City folder and we go down to Scenes, we can open up the sample scene that it comes with. And we'll just save our current scene before navigating to that one. And what we see is that it comes with this kind of pre-built city already. And we can see all the objects in the scene by going over to the Hierarchy window. And if we want to use this exact city layout, all we need to do is grab the objects in the scene that we want to use. In this case, let's use the ground object and this group object, which contains the buildings and the props. And we'll just select both of those. Then right click and copy. And then we'll navigate back to our scenes. We'll go to 3D Environment 2. And what we'll do to add this is we'll delete the objects that we've already placed in our environment by just selecting them in the Hierarchy window and hitting delete. And then in the Hierarchy window, we can right click and press paste. And what you'll see, we now have the city that was already pre-made with the White City package. And then of course we can just move this down so that it's centered where our plane was. And let's just try to center this over our little white square. You can find that white square. And now we have a built-in city that we can use with our experiments. Now that we have our two environments built, let's try to use them in an experiment. To do this, we're first going to minimize the Unity editor window. And then we're going to navigate to the OpenMaze project folder. Then to configuration files, and then to tutorials. And what you'll see is that each tutorial video has a corresponding experiment configuration file. For this tutorial, we'll find that configuration file in step 2, building environments. And we're just going to open up that configuration file called building environments. I'm using the Sublime text editor to edit my configuration files, but you can use any text editor you wish that supports JSON type files. Now, just to give you a little bit of intuition on how OpenMaze configuration files work, you can think of these files as a script that OpenMaze follows. We're going to go through these in a lot more detail in later tutorials, but for this tutorial, I'm just going to give you a brief overview. First, the experiment executes blocks in the order that they're defined in block order. This experiment will execute block 1. Below, in the block list, is where all the blocks are contained. And as we can see, there's only one block in this experiment. Blocks execute trials in the order that's defined in trial order. So we can see that this experiment executes trial 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 7, and then 8. Each trial is defined in the trial data below. And we can see what each trial does by simply looking at the trial data. What we see is that trial 1 is a welcome page. It's an instructional trial, which means that it's going to display the image file found in tutorial instructions and called welcome.png. It's going to display this trial for trial time -1, which simply means that we need to press the trial end key in order to move to the next trial. We see that trial end key here is the spacebar. What you'll see is that trial 2, 3, and 4 are also instructions, and then trial 5 is our collection queue. Trial 6 and trial 7 are 3D trials, which can call our 3D environments that we just created. We see that in trial 6, the scene that is called is scene 2, and that in trial 7, the scene that is called is scene 4. These numbers correspond to the build numbers that are in the Unity editor. To take a closer look at these, let's first dock our experiment configuration file beside the Unity editor. Whenever you're building an OpenMaze experiment, it's always a good idea to have the experiment configuration file open next to the Unity editor. This will allow you to script your experiment while simultaneously making changes to your environments in Unity. Let's go back up to the build settings by going to File, Build Settings, to see what scenes are being called for each trial. And if we see trial 6 is calling scene 2, scene 2 refers to environment 1. You'll see the scene number is to the right and the name of the environment is to the left. Scene 7, on the other hand, is calling scene 4. We see that scene 4 is our environment 2. Now let's try running this experiment in Unity. Close the build settings, navigate to the project window, then to the scenes folder, and double-click the launch experiment scene. Make sure you save your scene. Once in the launch experiment scene, we can go up to the play button to test our experiment. Upon pressing the play button, you'll be prompted with a File Explorer window. Navigate to the appropriate configuration file for the experiment. Again, this one is in Tutorials, Step 2, Building Environments, and Building Environments. Then click Open. Now, typically you would want to enter participant number, session, and other information if you're running an actual participant. But when you're just testing, you can just click on the game window here and press the spacebar. As you can see, as expected, we have our welcome scene that's first displayed. Then, if we press the spacebar again, we see that our task instructions are then displayed. Pressing the spacebar again, we see that our control instructions are displayed. Pressing the spacebar again, we see that Get Ready is displayed. And what you'll notice about trial 5 is that the trial time is only 1 second. This means that the trial is going to time out after 1 second and move on to the next trial. So when we press our spacebar, we get our cue, and then we're placed into our environment 1. And as you can see, we're in the environment that we just created with our palm trees, our forest, and our mountains. Now, the coolest thing about building an experiment using OpenMaze is that you can actually manipulate the environment as you're testing your experiment to see what the outcome is going to look like to your participant. To do this, we're just going to go up and pause the experiment. Then, in the Scene View window, we can navigate around to see what we want to change. And we can click on objects like our terrain object. And then we'll go to one of the terrain tools and we'll just do some simple manipulations to this environment. So let's lower our mountains a little bit. We'll go to the paintbrush tool, then select raise or lower terrain. And then we'll just hover over our mountain, holding the shift key, and this will manipulate the height of the mountain, and you'll be able to see in real time what this looks like to the participant. Once you're happy with your changes, you can then unpause the experiment, go back to the game view window, and carry on the experiment. In this experiment, our task is just to collect the objects. Once we collect all the objects, the trial will end. We see our cue screen again, and now we're placed into our second environment, the city environment. Now if we go and collect the rest of the objects, we see that the last trial is trial 8, which is just the end screen, as expected. We can then go back up to the play button and click that and continue working on our experiment. To learn how to build more complex environments in Unity, you can check out the links in the description below. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to leave a comment in the comment section below the video. In the next set of tutorial videos, we'll dive into each section of the OpenMaze configuration file, where you will learn how to script your experiment.